My name is Tina Patterson. I'll be serving as moderator for today's session. I'm here because of my background. My journey to become a dispute resolution provider happened because I was planning to become a Foreign Service officer. I did not become a Foreign Service officer, but I have still traveled to the region that we'll be talking about today. I've been to Israel. I have visited Jordan, and most recently, when those of you who met me in December, I visited Egypt. So the conversation today, I'm hoping, and I know, I'm confident, will be very rich. Our intent with today's session is that we really have an opportunity to focus on, and for this conversation to not be a political discussion, but really to focus on the concept of peace. In the past, when I open up sessions like this, I usually talk about the words of peace, whether it's mir or paz or shalom or salam. Those are the words of peace that we all know in our own cultures. Speaking of today's panelists, for those of you that registered, you have seen the rich and impressive bios of both Orit Asnan as well as Ramzi Tawfik Isaac. I hope you're as excited as I am about today's panelists because they are going to share with us their wealth of experience, knowledge, and expertise on the topic. Orit, I'd like to start with you. As a peace builder, would you share a personal experience that has shaped your understanding of conflict, particularly in the context of the Middle East? What, in your opinion, makes conflicts in this region so complex?
Thank you for asking. I would first like to address what you already said, and I think that we all share the same language. As peace builders, as mediators, we share the language of mediation. And this is a common ground that can lead us to find magic and better future. And I want to start with that because maybe we all speak different languages. We come from different backgrounds. We come from different religions, but we share the language of mediation. And with this language, we can make a difference. I didn't intend to start with this, but something you said made me want to say that at the beginning. And regarding your question, I first want to share with you who I am as a mediator and a little bit about my background. And I mediate in Israel, in Tel Aviv, which is the economic capital of Israel, and in Haifa, which is my hometown. Haifa is a multicultural city with Christian Arabs, Muslim Arabs, Baha'i. There is a very famous Baha'i center in Haifa. There is a big Druze community, many Jews, newcomers, and people who live in Israel for many years. So it's a very diverse community. And Haifa is known for as a model for coexistence in Israel. And mediating in Haifa gives me the challenge and the pleasure to mediate diverse groups on almost a weekly basis. I have so many times a Christian lawyer with a Christian or Muslim or a Jewish client, and then a Jewish lawyer with a Muslim client, and a full group of diverse clients and lawyers who bring so many different cultural backgrounds, methods of negotiation, languages, religions, of course. And my experience is that, yes, we can overcome those barriers and find good, white, smart solutions. And if we can do that, we can broaden the group of parties and lawyers who serve as ambassadors to the notion that we can overcome differences despite cultural differences, despite the religious differences. And well, most of my mediations are business or civil conflicts. And it's officially not about the cultural differences, but awareness to the fact that it's always there in the room, and it's always what makes a difference if we know as mediators how to address the level of the cultural differences, the level of the challenges that are hidden underneath the official part of the conflict. If we know how to unveil those differences or those challenges and avoid them to be obstacles or impediments to the process, then the parties can solve the conflict and also understand that conflicts that have cultural aspects can be solved. So for me, it's about, on a daily basis, spreading ambassadors to the notion that we can make a difference. We can overcome conflicts even when there is a cultural level or a religion level challenge within this conflict. So this is my personal experience. One more thing I want to say. For me, dispute resolution, mediation is not just a dispute resolution tool. It's an excellent business tool, of course, and it's also a social tool. It's a way to show the parties and lawyers that we can communicate better within the mediation and then spread the good news around. So as mediators, I'm a professional mediator. That's what I do every day. I don't only see myself as a commercial mediator. I don't only do the dispute resolution, the classical one. For me, my passion when I have diverse groups is the understanding that we create respect and trust in the room despite of the different backgrounds, focusing on the common backgrounds. And the more we do that, the better world we can do. It's very difficult to say these days, very challenging period, more challenging to stay optimistic. But yes, even in this challenging period, I keep on mediating many groups that are diverse, and sometimes the topic of the conflict has some challenging cultural aspect. I'm talking about the last 6.5 months. But yes, if we do a proper mediation, if we come with our professional tools, we can make a difference. We can assist the parties to believe in smart solutions and not in aggressive ones.
Ramsey, should I repeat the question? Because I would like to hear your opinion on this as well, and I'm happy to repeat the question.
Rather, if you permit me to simply repeat the last part of the question from my side, that for me is the most interesting part, which is because it contains within it an assumption. What if it makes conflict in this region so complex? And I would like to start, if you permit me, of course, with that very particular question and the inherent assumption within it. So first of all, whenever there is an inherent assumption, that automatically flashes red on my radar screen, saying, well, before we jump in and ask the question, let's just look at the underlying assumptions and see if they are necessarily hold true. What might make a conflict in this region seem complex is the assumption that by definition of the conflict being in the region, it needs of necessity to be complex. And therefore we might accept extraneous arguments. I think, oh, well, it's so complex. Yes, of course. And can we ever find a solution? And so therefore, I would suggest that really sifting through the information and deciding what is the relevant aspect of each piece of information to what aspect of the resolution of the conflict. What is the problem is a lack of clarity. I would say it another way, the degree of muddled thinking. And I don't say that to insult anyone. I hope I'm not doing. I'm probably just as guilty as anyone else in the past, perhaps still am, of muddled thinking over this. But I have done my level best and continue to do so, and hopefully I will do so again today, in learning from others and trying to arrive at greater clarity. The things that have helped me with this, and I'll say this by way of introduction as well as relevance to the point under discussion, there have been three main elements that have helped me arrive at a great degree of clarity. One is the standpoint of Quakers, because they hold that human life is sacred, no matter who, no matter what, no matter from where. One of the main tenets of Quakerism, or the Religious Society of Friends, is acknowledge that of God in each person, regardless of whom, regardless of where, regardless of what they've done. And with that in mind, that is probably what caused me to be attracted to other like-minded Quakers to try and do something about this muddled mess, more than just pray. And we realized that, in fact, there is a problem about it being a muddled mess. There were things that went unquestioned. For example, the idea of what will happen when, the day after the war has come to an end. Well, if it carries on like this, there won't be many people left to do anything with them. So there's so many things that go unquestioned. And being able to bounce ideas around with fellow-minded people who at least start with the basic point that all human life is sacred is a helpful thing to do. And that's how Quaker peace-building perspectives was established. The other thing that helped me in this regard is actually going down the route of being trained in mindfulness, which again has helped me to really spot what seems to be going unquestioned as assumptions. Examples would be the repeated and understandable calls for reform of the Palestinian Authority. Sure, it's good to call for the reform of anybody that seems that they'll benefit from being reformed, but how is that directly linked to resolving the conflict going forward? It is really questioning the connection between statements that seem to go unquestioned, or the idea that often I come across, that it often trotted out that, oh, this side or that side will never accept such and such a solution, whatever it might be. But when you look at the horrendous loss of life, not only since 7th of October, this has been going on in volcanic eruptions, I call it. And this is not to make little of it, it's actually to show how horrific it has been since 1948. 7th of October just be the most recent of the volcanic eruption. By an eruption, I mean mass slaughter of humanity. Well, then it's got way beyond the point of saying, well, because one side or the other side simply could not possibly accept such a solution, we'll just have to let them carry on slaughtering each other. I don't think so. So I think the time has come. I would say perhaps the time came a long time ago for humanity to take a stand and say, well, we need really now to make up for lost time and far too many deaths and far too much destruction already, to see how we can bring this meat grinding machine of mass slaughter to a halt, and then to distinguish between two things which are often combined. And this again is an example of the muddled thinking. The things that are often muddled and combined unhelpfully is saying, yes, but they did that, and no, but they did that. Well, that term, they did whatever, means pursuing accountability for past action. And whenever I hear anything along those lines, I say, good, take it to court. Oh, war crimes, good, take it to court. Oh, genocide, good, take it to court. And that's why I actually really celebrate what South Africa did with the ICJ. Finally, at last, the right course of action in the right forum, and no more of this mudslinging, pouring more oil on the fire. Because in the meantime, while you're pursuing accountability for past action, you also separately and urgently need to work out a solution going forward. If you accuse me of stealing your wallet and I accuse you of having money in your wallet, in that wallet, which belonged to me, for example, and all hell broke out between us. Okay, someone's going to look into the background behind the wallet and the money. But what are we going to do about the relationship between you and I going forward, that we have now become sworn enemies, and our children, nephews, and grandchildren are out to slit each other's throats and whatever, and consider each other to be an existential threat? Now, none of that has actually happened, but we need to really separate potential disaster from pursuing, investigating, and bringing about accountability what has already happened. Otherwise, we are committed to allowing the slaughter generating machine to carry on and producing more violations.
Are you ready to become the change you want to see in your community or in your workplace? If so, check out our tailored workshops and mediation skills, training and certification designed to equip you with the practical skills to become an effective conflict resolver and a certified mediation practitioner. Now, let's get back to the show.
I am going to say, as the moderator, no restraint necessary, but I do want to circle back, and I'm going to use the language that you've already told me you believe is muddled, but I'm going to stick with my script and ask Orit, what, in your opinion, makes conflicts in this region so complex?
I'm not an expert in the region, but my expertise mediation, so I want to address this question as well as a mediator. And for me, every conflict is like a triangle. One aspect is always about the legal issues. One aspect is about the property or economical issues. And the other aspect, which is sometimes hidden, but is very, very dominant, is the cultural, emotional aspect. To solve the problem, it's always about addressing all the angles of the triangle. If you ignore one of them, you miss the opportunity to solve the dispute. And I don't know how you call one problem that has so many, not only 3, not 4, maybe 50 kinds of edges that needs to be addressed. What is unique about or makes the conflict in the Middle East so complex, as far as I see it as a mediator, is that it is, of course, like every conflict, multi-layered, but the layers, there are so many layers to address. It's so long. Ramzi mentioned, and I agree with him, it hasn't started on the 7th of October. Ramzi mentioned 48. We can keep on going to the past. It's long. And the longer it is, the more pain the conflict is covered with, the more pain needs to be addressed by whoever is going to succeed to solve the problem. It's about money, it's about property, it's about land, it's about ego, it's about different religious beliefs, different methods of negotiation that are influenced by different cultural backgrounds. I would say that we live in an era that it's bigger than the Middle East, of course, that the truth is no longer the only factor. And in this era that we live in, there is so much discussion about what is really true, what really happened, what didn't happen, and fake news are also something that needs to be addressed by whoever is going to manage to solve this dispute. I managed already the endless pain by all the parties involved. Because it is so long, it's really difficult to find the strings of hope. We need hope in the area. We need people to believe that it is possible. And the more pain is covering the conflict, the less voice of hope we hear. And this is challenging. Again, this is bigger than the Middle East, but there is a lot of extremity around in the world today. It's a global problem, and the Middle East also suffers from that, and it adds to the challenges of this specific conflict. I would add leadership. If we look at history, good leaders made a difference. And without mentioning any specific leader, I think that we lack brave leadership and we lack good people who would add sanity into the conversation, hope, and good management. And I would add, lastly, because it is so complex, it is very difficult to find a good mediator who can handle such complexity.
Thank you. So there's a thread both of you have brought up, and it has to do with the conversation and the forum, as well as assumptions regarding what is the complexity or what composes that complexity, if there is such a thing. I'm going to go back to you, Ramsey, and pull this thread. You mentioned South Africa and the ICJ. We've talked about conversation, but and I think we all know this, that there are many public forums discussing Middle East, specifically Israel and Palestine. You've mentioned some other conflicts regionally and other parts of the world, but also in the past. From a peace builder's perspective, what do you think is being left out of the conversation about peace in the Middle East?
I'd like to start my response by picking up on one word that Orit said a few moments ago, the word leadership. And I will not be quite as diplomatic as Orit was, and in fact I will name one particular country. The country, happily and sadly, which I will name in this particular instance, is the United States of America. In the context that it's my view, and I think it's widely shared, that the title superpower is not associated with the degree of destructive capacity you have, how much nuclear weapons you have, or how large the landmass is. I had the idea of a superpower as being a country that did not have to follow the lead of other countries, and therefore had the political independence to show leadership in the world. And that's the way I viewed the USA as being a superpower in the days of President Jimmy Carter, when I would say they showed true leadership in brokering the peace negotiations between Egypt and Israel. That does not seem to be the impression that is gained of USA at the moment, of showing leadership to really bring about a resolution of this conflict. That would be the area where I think leadership is needed more, and bravery. So the other thing I would say is, and I say this really wearing my linguist hat, I'm rather obsessive about the use of words and choice of use of words and what they mean. And that is part of what I think creates this false image of complexity. Because of whichever term that you use, you're going to have more than one understanding of it. So when you call it the Arab-Israeli conflict, well, Iran is not an Arab state. Whatever terms a person uses, you are going to find some exception that doesn't fit that terminology. And in fact, I have got to the point, I thought, okay, so what terms should I use? This has actually been a real puzzle for me, quite frankly. And the solution I arrived at for my own use is I use the word Israeli-Palestinian conflict, and I define what I mean by the word Israeli and what I mean by the word Palestinian. I define the word Israeli as a citizen of the state of Israel within the borders as they will be delimited after the resolution of the conflict. And I define the word Palestinian as a citizen of the state of Palestine as it will be established and its borders delimited as a result of the solution of the conflict. And those two states could very possibly, in fact most likely, contain a significant number of people who consider themselves to be of Palestinian origin, ethnically, especially the right of return is implemented. You're going to have people living in the state of Israel who have been granted the right to return to areas of land with which they have an ancestral connection, going back since 1967, for example, or before. Because otherwise, if I don't find some, dare I say, simplistic, at least simplifying terminology, I'm just going to be adding to my own confusion, because whatever label I use will be a yes, but. And so this is, again, one of the factors that I think has added to the perception of complexity, is just following one crowd or another in the use of label and realizing that actually each label has the limit of its applicability. And that's why I've decided to make up my own labels and define what I mean. Israeli, citizen of the state of Israel; Palestinian, citizen of the state of Palestine. It's a very political, diplomatic document based, but it's related then to what would be the legal categorization of each person under that label. What rights do they lay claim to? What obligations do they come under into the legal framework they have to abide by? What concerns do they have based on that categorization? And I found that using that approach has helped me to arrive at a greater degree of clarity and to be more easily understood by others, which has been, I suppose, a step in the right direction. In terms of a solution, again, the word solution, I think, is a word that Orit used. Well, I'm going to enjoy sticking my neck out and maybe appearing very, very naive and say the following. There's a difference between solution and resolution. Here I go being my obsessive linguist again. I'd say resolution means the implementation of a solution. The solution is simply how you solve a riddle. So I'd say that this riddle has been solved. It just hasn't been resolved. The solution has not been implemented. And the ironic thing is the different elements of the solution have been proposed independently by different people.
Are you ready to become the change you want to see in your community or in your workplace? If so, check out our tailored workshops and mediation skills, training and certifications designed to equip you with the practical skills to become an effective conflict resolver and a certified mediation practitioner. Now, let's get back to the show.
All right, I'm going to ask the same question of you. What do you think is being left out of the conversations about peace in the Middle East?
First of all, when I address the complexity of this specific conflict, I think that I forgot the most important factor. You know, sometimes there are two parties in my mediation room, but outside in the tribune, in the stadium, overlooking my mediation room, there are so many other players, very strong players, that are super involved in mediation. And if I don't address the existence of the other parties in order to try to map the full scope of the conflict, I would miss the opportunity to assist the parties. And going from my own personal mediation room to the Middle Eastern conflict, I would say this is not a Palestinian-Israeli issue. This is a much bigger issue. I would say it's a global conflict, but it's definitely a Middle Eastern conflict, a very wide interpretation of the Middle East. Therefore, it is so complex because there are so many parties involved and there are so many interests involved, economic interests, power balance. And thank you, Ramsey, for thinking I'm trying to be diplomatic. I'm flattered. I would say that I'm trying to be careful in the way I use my language because I believe that it's not about my language. It's not about my definitions. It's about my ability, or I'm making an effort to use a language that is going to be acceptable in the ears of whoever listens. I might have my choice of language that might offend somebody, and I want to avoid that. So we have to find our language when we talk and try to solve any conflict, and especially this conflict. And Ramsey, thank you again. I used solution and you elaborated for resolution, and I'm going to use that from now, because I think that this is the way to walk in a path that might lead us to a better method of dialogue. And only a better method of dialogue would lead to some kind of solution or resolution or peace and quiet to whoever is involved. And I have already mentioned that whoever is involved is not only Israelis and Palestinians. It's a much bigger group, all watching around, sometimes very involved, sometimes less involved, but very interested and deep inside this conflict, actively or less actively. And I don't think I fully answered your question. So if you want to ask me again, I will try to be more accurate in my answer. Did I answer your question?
You are, and I will pose it again because I believe we have more to share. So the question, what do you think is being left out of the conversation about peace in the Middle East?
It's us, the people, the interest of the people who live in the region, and at the end of the day want to live peacefully. I want to believe that it doesn't matter where you live. Most people want to live in peace. But again, I go back to leadership, and I don't look for big leaders. And I said I won't mention any leader, but I take responsibility. It's not only other leaderships, it's also very close ones. I think that the leaders today don't, and this is true in many wars in the history, they take their people as hostages. This is a very difficult word for me to say these days. This is a very emotional word for me to say, but I think we are all paying the price. And by saying we is the citizens of the region, we are paying the price for bad leadership, for leaders who don't take responsibility for what is good for their citizens. This is true wherever I look around. I think what we lack in order to solve the conflict is, and I don't point it to any party or any actor specifically, there is a tendency to focus on the past pain and past problems, and this is true to all participants, and fighting against each other instead of fighting, find common sense solutions or resolutions. And I think once a dialogue will be led, focusing or fighting for solutions, for ones that respect all the relevant parties, this is the only time that a real chance or hope will be entering the region. Right now, the focus is not on what is going to happen, is about retaliating, and this is true to all parties, retaliating to what has happened last year, last week, yesterday. I mean, this is just going back and forth and going nowhere. So changing the dialogue and changing the fight for solutions.
Excellent. So the dialogue, and Art, I'm circling back to you. And Ramsey, you will have the same question. The conversation, the dialogue, what's being said. And you've touched upon a couple of points, but I'm going to pull this thread a little further regarding resolution or solution. How do fear, resentment, language, and selective empathy manifest in the Middle East conflict? And what role do these elements play in either exacerbating or alleviating the situation? And or you've talked a little bit about this, but I want to pull that thread more because it's a topic both of you have touched upon, and I'd like for you to expound upon, especially for those who are not familiar with either the past, the present, or the conversations that have been happening. So again, how do fear, resentment, language, and selective empathy manifest in the conflict, and what role do these elements play in either exacerbating or alleviating the situation?
I think that we can all agree that these elements play the major role today in the conversation and in the actions taken by all the parties around. I wear glasses. It's a matter of what kind of glasses do I put on my eyes. Do I want to see only the pain, the resentment, the differences, the problems, the obstacles, the impediments, whatever? This is like mud on my ability to see anything else. Yes, there is so much pain. I was talking about it earlier. There are so many challenges. Yes, I am not avoiding it. But if we don't clear a little bit our ability to see some hope and some other things, then these factors are going to make us drown. And we don't want to drown. At the end of the day, people in the region want to live with respect, with vision, with prosperity. And this can't be achieved with seeing only the mud in the glasses. And yes, I'm not avoiding it. It's all existing there, and I managed already that we have to address all levels of the conflict. When I said the triangle, so it's a multi-layered problem, we have to address everything to acknowledge the pain in all sides of the conflict. It's not only my pain. When Ramzi talks about his pain, I want to address that. When Muhammad talked about his pain in a webinar that we participated together, the first thing I said to him is, yes, we both feel the fear, we both feel so much similar emotions, but it's a question whether we want these emotions and differences to be our navigators, or do we want to find other things that will navigate us out of those obstacles.
Ramzi, I have the same question for you.
And I'd like to pick up on specific words. It seems to be my habit, if not my obsession. The word empathy was mentioned a few moments ago. That was selective or otherwise. Empathy, of course, related to emotion. This is, again, one of the confusing factors. That's a factor which add to the confusion, because which facts, assuming that the truth of the fact is not disputed, which facts are given the most priority is related to how people feel about those facts. And so indeed, feelings and facts are interwoven with each other. The other thing that was mentioned a few moments ago is what is missing, who is not being involved in the discussion. And Orit said us. I love that response, by the way, because of the fact that the main voices that are heard in the mass media and the main channels of communication are those who are saying the same kind of stuff over and over and over again. Whereas those who are, I think, looking for a way of reconciling the apparently irreconcilable. You know, if one group is saying the answer has to be yes, and the other group is saying no, the answer has to be no. But what if there is someone else who's saying, actually, you can get an answer of yes and no to this, to work. And that's not playing with words. I'm being absolutely serious. And there is not much space, if at all, being made available to alternative perspectives. And this, again, is a serious difficulty. So with that in mind, I would like now to switch to who are not being, I think, sufficiently involved, even in the mainstream, which I think hold parts of the keys to the solution, which I believe exists in fragments on the table. In no particular order, after October 7th, the settlements to the north of Israel, close to the Lebanese border, were cleared to protect the safety of the people living in those settlements. For me, that therefore debunks the idea of any settlement being a fact on the ground. It shows that when circumstances are conducive, the political will is found to clear them and to move the inhabitants to a safer location. Another example would be a statement by the Turkish foreign minister when they said that they were prepared to be acting as a guarantor of a ceasefire. It caught my eye so much, I started to dig into it. The idea seemed to be acting a bit like an insurance policy. You know, Tina, if you, heaven forbid, someone crashes in your car, you don't wait until the court decides who was at fault. You claim it off your insurance company first, and then they claim it off the insurance company of the other party. And if there's a dispute, the two insurance companies take it to court, but that's not your problem. Your insurance company covers you because of your insurance policy. End of story. And it's really that approach, an insurance policy type approach to a ceasefire, which I think is absolutely necessary, because we cannot expect any degree of trust by any side in any side. And if we are able to have a mechanism of a guarantor to redress any damage, to prevent any damage from being created in the first place, that's a crucial element or ingredient in solving the hot stage of the conflict. And that is missing from the media coverage, and I don't know why. Another part that is, again, missing is the Saudi heir to the throne, Mohammed bin Salman, when he was saying that there will be no normalization with Israel until there's the establishment of an independent sovereign state of Palestine. Now, if you link that with a presentation given by Benjamin Netanyahu to the United Nations, where he drew a line with a red marker right up through Saudi Arabia to the port of Haifa, if you link those two bits together, then clearly what I call the red marker route to Haifa is not going to happen until there is an independent state of Palestine set up. And so really the Israeli government, in the person person of Prime Minister Netanyahu can't have their cake and eat it. If they want normalization, they're going to have to find some way of arriving at a independent state of Palestine, which is again what the United States has been calling for, and also using the precedent set by clearing the settlements of its inhabitants in the northern region of Israel to debunk any statement of saying, dare I say, facts on the ground. Last but not least, you mentioned selective empathy, and I'm going to focus on the word selective rather than empathy. There is also selective understanding. Another way of saying it, there is significant misunderstanding of what the main elements of law state. When people talk about Resolution 242, for example, I wonder how many people who quote Resolution 242 have actually bothered to read what it says. So there is a problem with the emotionally charged nature of the approach to the problem, the absence from the discussion of key elements which can contribute to a solution, which are already on the table from the people I've just mentioned. And there is a serious problem in terms of lack of clear, simple understanding of what the different legal bits really mean and say.
Thank you for listening. We hope you enjoyed today's episode. You can support us by leaving a 5-star review. And if you haven't already, please subscribe to stay informed whenever we upload a new episode. See you in the next episode.